She thought a moment of frustration would make her feel powerful. But when Megan Harris, a high-strung manager at a prestigious tech company, throws a cup of water on a seemingly unimportant employee, she doesn't realize the shocking truth about who he really is. In a twist that will leave you stunned, Megan's world is turned upside down as she faces the consequences of her impulsive actions. What happens when she humiliates the wrong person? Find out in this gripping tale of arrogance, redemption, and the price of a single mistake. Megan Harris had always prided herself on getting what she wanted. To her, life was about power, entitlement, and a sense of control that she'd worked hard to maintain. With her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, her expensive handbag in hand, and a tone that could cut through steel, she was used to walking into any room and commanding attention. People often stepped aside for her, and if they didn't, they were reminded who was in charge. It was just another Tuesday afternoon at the bustling offices of Harris Technologies, the tech company she'd recently started working for as a manager. Megan had never quite gotten the respect she deserved from her co-workers, or so she thought. She walked past the desks with a look of disdain on her face, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythmic, almost menacing way. Today was no different until she saw him. The man was sitting at a desk, hunched over a laptop, looking completely absorbed in his work. His attire was casual jeans, a simple shirt, no flashy accessories. Yet, there was something about him. Maybe it was his calm demeanor or the way he seemed completely out of place in the corporate office environment. But Megan, with her sharp instincts, had already decided that he was probably just another one of those low-level employees. Her mood soured. She had been passed over for a promotion twice this year, and nothing irritated her more than the thought of someone who she deemed unimportant being treated better than her. She had worked too hard to be ignored by people who didn't matter, and today, she was in no mood to tolerate anyone acting like they were above her. She was standing near the coffee station when she saw him, again still absorbed in his work. Without a second thought, she grabbed the nearest water bottle from the counter. As she walked by, her mind raced with one thought: he's just another face in the crowd. And with a forceful push, she threw the water straight at him, the cold liquid splashing across his shirt and laptop in an instant. The office fell silent, with all eyes turning toward her as she stood there, watching the man's shock and anger unfold in front of her. The man blinked, slowly looking up from his laptop, and wiped his face. For a second, it seemed like he was in disbelief, processing what had just happened. But instead of raising his voice or reacting harshly, he simply stood up. His calmness unsettled Megan, but she didn't care. She had made her point. "Do you know who I am?" Megan asked, her tone dripping with condescension as she crossed her arms. "I'm a manager here. You just wasted my time and space in this office. You should be careful who you mess with." The man stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before replying in the most composed voice Megan had ever heard. "You're right," he said, pausing briefly. "I don't know who you are, but I know one thing." Megan smirked, thinking she had intimidated him. But his next words caught her completely off guard. "I'm the CEO of Harris Technologies. This is my company." Her smirk vanished, replaced by a rush of panic. Her mind raced as she realized who she had just humiliated in front of the entire office. This wasn't just some low-level employee. No, this was the man who owned the very company she worked for. I didn't know," Megan stammered, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. The CEO simply nodded, his face still calm, but his eyes now sharp and calculating. "You didn't, but now you do." Megan swallowed hard, her stomach sinking as she realized the gravity of what had just happened. She had crossed a line she couldn't take back, and the consequences were likely to be much worse than a ruined shirt and a soggy laptop. "Get back to your desk, Megan," he said coolly, his voice cold and steady. "You're going to need some time to think about how you treat people here." As she walked back to her cubicle, her heart hammered in her chest. Her mind was a whirl of disbelief. She had just insulted the CEO, her boss, and in front of everyone. She thought back to the arrogant tone she had used, the way she dismissed him as someone insignificant, and now she was facing the consequences of her own actions. But Megan wasn't used to failure, and she wasn't ready to let this go without a fight. She was determined to figure out how to make things right, or at the very least, keep her job. But what she didn't know yet was that the CEO had already made up his mind about her, and the consequences for Megan Harris were only just beginning. The next few days at Harris Technologies felt like a nightmare to Megan. Every time she walked into the office, she could feel the weight of eyes on her. The whispers behind her back were almost palpable, and the tension in the air was thick. Her usually confident stride had turned into a nervous shuffle, and no amount of makeup or fancy outfits could hide the humiliation she felt after her encounter with the CEO. To make matters worse, her once pristine reputation was crumbling. She overheard a few colleagues talking near the coffee machine, barely above a whisper. "Did you hear? Megan threw water on Mr. Anderson. You know, the CEO," one of them said, her voice filled with disbelief. "I heard he's considering firing her." The other responded, sounding genuinely concerned. That was pretty bold, but not in a good way. Megan tried to ignore the gossip, but it was impossible. The tension in the office was suffocating. Even her boss, who had always been friendly and eager to work with her, now gave her cold, distant looks. It was as if she had become a pariah, someone no one wanted to associate with. But the worst was yet to come. That Thursday, Megan was called into the HR office. Her stomach flipped as she sat down across from two of the company's senior HR representatives. One of them, a middle-aged woman named Linda, had always been warm and approachable. But today, her expression was stiff, almost clinical. "Megan," Linda began, her voice soft but firm, "we've had a lot of feedback about your behavior during the incident with Mr. Anderson. It's been a point of concern for several people in the office." Megan could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands clenched into tight fists. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. "We understand that you may have acted in the heat of the moment," Linda continued, "but throwing water on an employee, especially the CEO's, completely unacceptable behavior in any professional setting." I didn't know," Megan stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "We know you didn't, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened. And it's had a ripple effect on the office dynamic." The other HR representative, a man named Greg, added, "People don't feel comfortable around you right now. And, frankly, it's damaging the company culture." Megan's mind was racing. She had never thought her actions would lead to such an outcome. The water, just a small act of frustration, had shattered everything she had worked for in this company. She had never felt so small, so insignificant. "The CEO has requested that we suspend you for a week," Linda said, her tone unwavering. "You'll be expected to reflect on your behavior and how it impacts the workplace. After the suspension, we will reassess your position here." Megan's stomach dropped. A week. The thought of being away from the office, away from the action, made her feel like she was being cast aside, erased from the company she had once worked so hard to be a part of. "Suspended," Megan repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But that's too much. I've been with this company for over a year. I'm a valuable asset." "We understand your frustration," Greg said, his voice colder now, "but your actions were a violation of company policy. We have to take this seriously." Megan felt her world starting to spin. She had never imagined that a simple, careless action could lead to such devastation. A week off, a suspension. What would her colleagues think? What would Mr. Anderson think when he found out? Megan left the HR office, the weight of the conversation hanging over her like a dark cloud. The office felt even colder as she walked back to her desk, her face flushed with embarrassment. Everyone seemed to be watching her, waiting to see how she would react. But instead of retreating into herself, Megan made a decision. She was going to prove that she was better than this. She wouldn't let a single mistake define her. She would work harder, show that she could be a valuable asset to the company once again. But first, she had to survive the next week without completely unraveling. That evening, Megan sat in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had always prided herself on her ability to control every situation, to get what she wanted, but now, all she could see was a woman who had let her anger get the best of her. Her career, her reputation, everything was slipping away because of a single moment of carelessness. She took a deep breath and stood up. It wasn't too late to fix this. She could still find a way to get back on top. All she had to do was find the right path forward. The next morning, Megan arrived at the office, her eyes set with determination. She was ready to work through this suspension and prove to everyone, including Mr. Anderson, that she was more than just a mistake. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the consequences of her actions were far from over. Megan's first day of suspension was strangely quiet. The office, which had once been a space filled with bustling energy and constant motion, felt like a distant memory. The ringing of phones, the soft tapping of keyboards, the chatter between co-workers, it all felt muffled now, as if the world outside had moved on without her. She sat at home, flipping through job listings, trying to distract herself from the weight of the situation. But the more she scrolled through opportunities, the more hopeless she felt. All she could think about was her massive mistake. She had crossed a line no one in her position could afford to cross, and now it felt like her career was teetering on the edge of ruin. By the time Thursday evening arrived, Megan was almost ready to give up. The suspension was eating away at her confidence. But just as she was about to shut down her laptop, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unfamiliar number. "Meet me at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I think we need to talk." The message was signed simply Anderson. Her heart skipped a beat. Mr. Anderson? Was he calling her in for more punishment? A meeting with the CEO during her suspension could only mean one thing. Her job was in jeopardy. She was going to lose everything, but Megan wasn't one to back down. She needed to show him that she was still capable of handling herself, even if she had made a monumental mistake. She had to own up to it, make him see that she was better than her actions. The next morning, Megan walked into the building with a nervous energy she hadn't felt in years. She walked past the security desk, gave her ID to the receptionist, and made her way up to the top floor, the executive floor, the heart of Harris Technologies. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow, the seconds ticking by as she wondered what awaited her on the other side. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the quiet, sleek office. It was entirely different from the chaos of the open floor below. The cold, modern design of the space was almost intimidating. Mr. Anderson's office was at the end of a long corridor, the large glass windows giving a clear view of the skyline. Beyond, she knocked lightly, and a deep voice called from inside, "Come in." Megan took a deep breath and pushed open the door. There, standing behind his desk with a calm, unreadable expression, was Mr. Anderson. He was dressed casually again, in a simple grey sweater and jeans, but the sense of power he exuded was unmistakable. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward the chair in front of his desk. "I trust you're well." Megan hesitated, her mind racing. She was supposed to be suspended. She had assumed this meeting would be some sort of formality before her termination. But this felt different. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied, forcing herself to remain calm as she sat down. There was a long, silent pause before Mr. Anderson spoke again, his voice low but steady. "I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak with me in person, to explain your side of things." Megan felt her chest tighten. I was out of line, Mr. Anderson. I was frustrated, and I let that frustration get the best of me. I didn't know you were the CEO, and I should have never acted that way. I'm truly sorry for what I did, and I understand the consequences." Mr. Anderson nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, but let me make one thing clear. What you did was unacceptable, not just in my eyes, but for everyone in this company. The way you treat people, anyone, regardless of their position, affects the culture of Harris Technologies. We don't tolerate that here." Megan nodded, her stomach sinking. She had never felt so small. "I've ruined it," she thought. But Mr. Anderson continued, his eyes now softer. "I believe in second chances. I've always believed that people can learn and grow from their mistakes. If you truly want to prove yourself, you'll have to start by showing everyone that you can be someone who uplifts others, not someone who tears them down." Megan looked up at him, confusion and relief battling for control of her thoughts. Are you giving me another chance?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," he replied, "but it's not going to be easy. You'll need to work hard, and you'll need to earn back the respect of your colleagues. I'll be keeping a close eye on you, and you'll have to prove to me that you're capable of changing." Megan felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't the golden ticket she'd hoped for, but it was a second chance, and that was all she needed. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I won't disappoint you." Mr. Anderson gave a small smile, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I hope not, but remember this, actions speak louder than words." Megan left the meeting with a sense of resolve she hadn't felt in days. The path ahead was going to be tough, but she was ready to fight for her place at Harris Technologies. She wasn't going to let a single mistake define her. And as she walked back to her desk, she knew one thing for sure: things were about to change. The next few weeks at Harris Technologies were a whirlwind of change for Megan. After her conversation with Mr. Anderson, she had thrown herself into her work with a renewed sense of purpose. Her suspension was lifted, but her reputation was still in tatters. She had been given the opportunity to redeem herself, and she was determined not to waste it. The first step was showing her colleagues that she was genuinely remorseful. The same people who had once whispered about her behind her back now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Megan knew it wasn't going to be easy to win their trust again, but she wasn't about to back down. She made a conscious effort to be more approachable. She greeted her team every morning with a smile, asked how they were doing, and took the time to listen when they spoke. Her usual aloof, condescending attitude was replaced by a new sense of humility. It wasn't an act. Megan had realized that the world didn't revolve around her, and that true leadership came from lifting others up, not tearing them down. It wasn't long before her co-workers began to notice the change. There were still whispers, but they were quieter now. Some people started to warm up to her again. Her team, once distant, began to engage with her more openly. Megan had earned their respect not through grand gestures, but through consistent, genuine efforts to be a better person. But the real test came when Megan was given a new project to major, pitched to a potential client that could make or break her career at Harris Technologies. The client was known for being tough to impress, and the stakes were high. Mr. Anderson had personally asked her to lead the team on this pitch, a decision that both terrified and motivated her. She spent countless hours preparing, making sure every detail was perfect. She worked with her team, listening to their ideas and incorporating their feedback, something she hadn't done before. She was no longer the boss who told people what to do. She was now a collaborator, a partner, and her team responded to that, delivering ideas and insights that she could never have come up with on her own. The day of the pitch arrived, and Megan stood in front of the potential client, with her team beside her. She felt the familiar nerves in her stomach, but this time, they were different. She wasn't just nervous about her performance, she was nervous about her team. She wanted to prove to them that they were capable of greatness together. As the presentation unfolded, Megan found herself speaking more than she ever had before. She talked not only about the technical aspects of the pitch, but also about the values that drove Harris's Technologies: innovation, collaboration, and integrity. She made it clear that the company wasn't just about making money. It was about creating meaningful change and building strong, lasting relationships. To her surprise, the client was impressed. They asked tough questions, but Megan handled them with confidence, backed by the support of her team. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to follow up. But Megan didn't feel a sense of victory. She felt something else. She felt proud. That evening, as she walked back to her desk, she saw Mr. Anderson standing by the window of his office, looking out over the city. He turned when he saw her approach. "You did well today, Megan," he said, his voice steady but approving. Megan felt a wave of relief wash over her. It had been a tough journey, but it felt like everything was finally coming together. "Thank you, sir," she replied. "I couldn't have done it without the team. We worked together." Mr. Anderson smiled, and for the first time since their meeting after the water incident, Megan saw a warmth in his eyes. "You're right. Leadership is about the team, not just the individual, but you've come a long way in a short time. I'm impressed with how you've handled things. Keep it up." Megan's heart swelled with pride. She had earned her place back in the company, not through manipulation or power, but through honesty, hard work, and a willingness to grow. In the following months, Megan continued to thrive. Her work ethic, her renewed approach to leadership, and her dedication to improving her relationships with others didn't go unnoticed. Her team began to outperform even their own expectations, and she was credited with helping turn around the department's performance. She still had a long way to go. The incident with the water would never be completely forgotten, but Megan knew now that her actions spoke louder than any past mistake. She had learned that real success wasn't about climbing over people to reach the top. It was about lifting others as you climbed, building something greater together. And as for Mr. Anderson, he continued to watch Megan's progress, impressed by how she had turned her career around. He had given her a second chance, and in the end, it had paid off. But for Megan, the real reward was the knowledge that she had become the leader she always should have been, a leader who inspired, who uplifted, and who never stopped learning. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the hardest falls lead to the most meaningful rise, and Megan Harris had risen, stronger and wiser than ever before.